TikTok is the fastest growing app in the world. More than 1 billion downloads so far. No judgment from us if you've never heard of it. It really is geared to the under 20 set. It's a place for online fun and a chance at viral fame. So what makes TikTok tick? Well, videos like this one. Yeah, pets are big, especially if they can dance.
Bust down, Tatiana. I want to see you bust down. Pick it up, now break that shit down. Break it down. Speed it up, then slow that shit.
Because the app is hugely popular with teens, there's a lot of videos of parents being pranked, or in this case, a mom turning the tables.
Taking revenge on my kids, day 13.
What?
I'm just saying on the camera here.
As TikTok's popularity swells, though, so does the scrutiny. The app is owned by a Chinese company called ByteDance, and governments around the world are starting to ask questions and starting to warn that they believe what seems like fun actually comes with some serious strings attached.
A company compromised by the Chinese Communist Party knows where your children are, knows what they look like, what their voices sound like, what they're watching, and what they share with each other.
That's Republican Senator Josh Hawley at a Senate subcommittee hearing on big data, big threats, and China. So what are they so concerned about? Well, one thing is censorship. The other is how TikTok and perhaps the Chinese government may use your information. TikTok, for its part, says the fears are baseless. The company says in a statement, "We store all U.S. user data in the United States with backup redundancy in Singapore. Canada is the same as the U.S." But the parent company is still Chinese-owned, so it's not really clear that TikTok could be able to deny requests from the Chinese state. And it's not just the U.S. that's worried. TikTok's been banned in Indonesia, Bangladesh, and temporarily in India. It's also under investigation in the UK right now. So what's going on here in Canada? Well, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh certainly made headlines during the election campaign with this.
Nope. Yep. Nope. Yep.
That got more than 1 million views the day it was posted. Right now, TikTok is the #1 downloaded app in Canada. That beats Facebook and Netflix. And TikTok itself seems ready to stretch its Canadian presence. It's got ads up on LinkedIn right now saying the Canadian market is showing, quote, much excitement toward this quickly expanding platform. So far, Ottawa hasn't said much about it. The Communications Security Establishment tells us they've not received a government request to look into TikTok, but that they are aware of U.S. security concerns. Keep in mind, Canada's relationship with China is not at its healthiest. There's been a series of escalations in tensions since Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou was arrested in Vancouver in December. China detained 2 Canadian citizens right after that. And nearly a year later, Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig are still in custody. While many of Canada's allies are keeping Huawei away from their 5G development, Canada has not yet decided what to do. And now there's TikTok. While Ottawa weighs what it will or won't do, the Guardian newspaper got an inside look at how the app works, specifically its moderation guidelines, and they suggest censorship plays a big role in what you'll see on TikTok, that it's a lot less about fun and more of a data-collecting foreign policy play for China. Alex Hearn is the journalist who broke that story. He's the technology editor for The Guardian. He's joining us from London. We also have Jessica Davis joining us from Ottawa. She's a former intelligence analyst for CSIS. And Jessica, I'm going to come to you in just a moment. But Alex, I want to start with you. You were leaked a copy of these moderation guidelines. TikTok says they've been tweaked since then. But what about what you saw worried you?
The thing that worries me is that this fun, lighthearted app looks like it could be used to export Chinese censorship standards overseas, where not only specifically hot button issues in China like Tiananmen Square and Tibetan independence are banned, but where controversial content overall is frowned upon, algorithmically squashed, or just not promoted as much.
But how is this different than, Instagram and Facebook basically owning what we put on there anyway? Why is this different?
The key difference for me is that Facebook and Instagram have a very Silicon Valley attitude to content moderation, which says that they should be as hands-off as possible. Now, I have a lot of problems with Facebook and Instagram's moderation standards, but fundamentally, I find that easier to understand, work with, and know where I sit than moderation standards like TikTok's, which take an incredibly controlling and prescriptive approach to what the site should be. TikTok says it wants to be positive and happy, and it wants to be a place for artistic creativity. For me, artistic creativity necessarily involves an element of controversy, necessarily involves the ability to be political, to complain about the world. And I don't think TikTok agrees.
What kind of impact have your stories had so far, Alex? Have you seen downloads of the app drop, or has the government changed its position in any way?
On a state level, stories like mine and others have had a huge impact. TikTok was, at the beginning of this year, a cool startup. It was seen as the successor to Vine, a threat to Facebook's empire. Now, I think it's seen much more as soft power of the Chinese state.
What would you say then, given all that you know, Alex, to someone who's thinking of downloading it, or thinks it's a cool app, wants to get on TikTok?
I would say it is a cool app, it is a fun app, but I would be incredibly wary of building a brand or a following on the app, because fundamentally it's a company that almost proudly takes a much firmer hand in curating or censoring the content on it than any of its competitors. TikTok owns TikTok, and TikTok controls what goes on it, and you will always be there at their whims.
Alex, thank you for this.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's Alex Hearn joining us from London. And as promised, Jessica Davis is also here. She's a former CSIS intelligence analyst. And Jessica, all of this scrutiny on TikTok began because it is a Chinese-owned company that bought an American company. So given that, and given all of Alex's reporting, why aren't we hearing more from our own government?
In Canada, options are limited. We cannot review this transaction under our domestic legislation, which is the Investment Canada Act, for national security grounds. So we're really going to need to be playing a little bit of catch up after the Americans make their decision about this.
How much of what we're seeing or not seeing actually from the Canadian government on this has to do with Ottawa's current relationship with China, do you think, Jessica? The detained Canadians, Huawei, Meng Wanzhou, obviously, does it really have the ability to be loud about an issue like TikTok right now?
I suspect that the Canadian government's being quite selective in terms of the issues that it's engaging on at this very sensitive time. And I think TikTok, being very much under the purview of our U.S. colleagues, the Canadian authorities are going to leave it to the Americans to decide what to do about this.
Part of the statement we got from Ottawa suggests that users of any social media apps consider where the data from those apps is stored. Is it being stored in a country that has laws similar to the ones we have in Canada? So does that kind of warning go far enough?
I think the problem with a lot of these warnings is that is their ability to reach the average young Canadian. So the users of TikTok are generally a younger demographic. Are they going to be reading Government of Canada news releases or releases about social media and data privacy and protections? I think that that's probably a bit of a stretch to think that Canadians are going to be reading that, Canadians really of any age.
On that issue of China's reach potentially when it comes to TikTok, what specifically are you worried about?
I'm worried about a lot of different things, frankly, with Chinese reach and its ability to influence TikTok and ability to extract data from that company. So a couple of things really. I'd be worried about the Chinese government seeking to acquire mass data from TikTok. There's a lot of images and content that they could be using for a variety of different purposes, but there's also bio data, so individual identifying information, IP addresses, a lot of things that can tell you a lot about different people that can be used for foreign influence activities, to talent spot for potential recruiting, all kinds of different national security concerns.
Yeah, I suspect a teenager using it, or even someone in their early 20s, might think, what do they care if I put up a goldfish video or if I, as a mom, prank my teens?
I think it's a little bit about the content, but it's also a lot about all of the other things that are happening in the background of the application. So, using this kind of data to potentially train facial recognition software, other kinds of mass data or bulk data applications are all of a potential concern when you're talking about individual private information.
What do you make of the statement that TikTok has put out, also responded to us, adding Canada to that, saying, it's being stored in the US, you don't need to worry, the backup is in Singapore, and Canada and the US are the same. Nothing to worry about, nothing to see here.
I think the location of storage is important in terms of what jurisdiction the data is being stored in, but I also think that we need to be realistic about the reach of the Chinese state into Chinese companies. Whether Chinese companies have the ability to say no to requests by the Chinese government for data, I think is an open question, and probably one that I would say they are not generally going to be saying no to the Chinese government.
Jessica, thanks so much for your insight.
My pleasure. Thank you.